And our process for that is we will ask that those who have a comment to make will use the raise hand feature, at which point you'll be promoted to a panelist where you'll be able to voice your comment to the group and then taken back down into the attendee category of the webinar. So we appreciate all of your feedback. And after that point, we will move into our next steps. So we can talk about where we'll be going from this point forward. Next slide, please. So we want to say thank you for everybody for participating this evening. We have participants from Gates & Associates, which is our consultants crew, as well as wonderful advisors from the pros committee and the advisory committee as well. So thank you all for your time and for any of the work and reading of comments and emails and feedback that you have been doing beforehand this evening. It's greatly appreciated. And on the next slide is our reminder of the role of our advisory committee. So we would love to have insights from you guys. You represent the whole of Belmont, and we want to make sure that we're understanding their interests and ideas. We also are using you guys to help us connect to the greater community and get as much feedback and input as we can. And we really appreciate everything you've done to spread the word about our survey. And we also would like you to provide input. Let us know thoughts, comments, and feelings about everything we've done thus far and any valuable information we need to know to continue to move this project successfully forward. So with that, I'd like to kick it over to Linda Gates to talk us through some of our survey findings.
Great. Thank you very much, Casey. And I'm excited to be with you and share an overview of some of the information we've gathered from the survey so far. So first of all, congratulations. We had over 2,800 responses to the survey, which is really amazing and gave us great level of information. Really appreciate that community response. As you know, in the survey, we tracked responses from residents and non-residents. So 49% of the people who responded to the survey are Belmont residents, where 51% were people who reside outside of Belmont, although often in neighborhoods very close to Belmont. I thought what was interesting too is one of the questions that we asked were if people use parks outside of Belmont, and of the residents responding, the Belmont residents responding, 27% of them indicated that they use parks outside of Belmont. So there is definitely a reciprocity between people who live in Belmont and the surrounding community. And we will share data sharing you what we heard from the greater community and what we've heard from Belmont residents as we go through. Next slide. So one of the things we look at as we go through is sort of monitoring what the age group that's responding and whether they have children and such. So in the people, and not everyone fills out the age, but this is all Belmont only information. So this is of the Belmont community that responded. Primarily the people responding were in the age bracket of 35 to 65. So we had sort of the adult population primarily responded. We had a number of people who responded, over 400 of the people from Belmont who responded. So remember, that's like 1,400 people in Belmont responded, had children living in their household and youth. And the highest age group that there were youth in the households were 6 to 12. So to be aware that there's a large segment of the population that is being represented through their parents' opinions here. Next slide. So when we look at the data, we want to do a quick check to see if it aligns a little bit with the Belmont, the existing population. So it's not surprising that we had a lot of people in the 35 to 65 age group when the majority of Belmont residents are in that age group. So on one side, you're seeing the people responding to the survey, and the other, you're seeing the 2010 census. But you can sense that, so it makes sense that we have the pyramids where they are. We also do a quick check to see if we're being represented, the ethnic diversity of the community is being represented. So, it's primarily a white community. So most of the respondents were white, but we had a fair number of respondents by the Asian and Hispanic community as well. So we just check to make sure that we're reaching those groups. And when we see something low, we make sure in our focus groups, we try and recruit those interests into the focus groups to make sure they're being represented. Next slide. So in addition to sort of breaking it down to, Belmont residents and non-Belmont residents, we also had people complete something so we knew what neighborhood in Belmont they were coming from. This will be valuable to us later on when we want to do a deeper dive and sort of say, is there one particular neighborhood that really felt there was some need they had in their neighborhood? Or if there's often with an age group, so is there one particular age group that, even though they're not the majority, really wanted a certain kind of feature, so that we can make sure that we tailor to represent the cross section of the community. So as I said tonight, I'm giving you sort of the overview of what we found, but as we go through, we can always return if we need further deeper dive into information that's available to us in the survey data. Next slide. So when we looked at what people want in Belmont the most, because when we start to look at a community, we try and find out what they think about their existing park system and what they'd like to see in their park system, before we start. So when we looked at what people like about the existing park system, how they currently use it, the number one things were exercising, individual exercising, communing with nature, and peace and quiet. Now, on these charts, as you see, the heavy green line represents the Belmont residents only, and the dashed line represents the non-residents' responses. And you're going to see as we go through that the non-resident and the residents' responses often are very much aligned. But so that's a sort of an important thing to us to track, like where they deviated. But those were sort of the highest priorities were those kind of peace and quiet, communion with nature, and exercise, individual exercise. Those are the things people currently use the Belmont Park system for. Next slide. So then we asked about, well, which parks in the park system do you like the best? And where do you think we need some improvement? Twin Pines Park is obviously a beloved park, with the majority of Belmont residents rating it very high in terms of their satisfaction with it, followed by the Belmont Sports Complex, and then Barrett Community Center, Hallmark Park, and so on. Where people felt that there were some unsatisfactory things, you can notice the green things are way higher than the red areas. So these are kind of comparison, 550 people love Twin Pines, and 120 people maybe had a little bit of a problem with Barnett Community Center. And we look at that, and then there were individual write-in comments. So as we go through, we take all that information and think about what can we do better, what do we need to maintain and preserve. So next slide. So then we compare then the response of the residents to the non-residents. And obviously the residents have much stronger opinions about the park systems and such. But interesting enough, even the non-residents tended to rank the park system the same way as the Belmont community was ranking it, with Twin Pines, Belmont Sports Complex, and Hallmark Park being sort of people's favorites. Next slide. Next slide. And the same thing where we see less than satisfactory, the residents, the areas they found things unsatisfactory, the non-residents really did not have an opinion about the existing parks and athletic facilities and such. It was really primarily the residents. And as I said, these are specific things we'll be looking at as we move forward about how to make improvements to each of those facilities to meet the community's needs. Next slide. So we asked the same thing about sort of the open space system, and Belmont residents, obviously ranked their open space system very high, excellent, very good, with over, 900 of the people responding to the survey saying, they thought Water Dog open space was wonderful. And people who had any issues, as you can see way down there, they were more like they were unsatisfied with the component of it, but they generally really value the open space system. Next slide. So, and once again, when we looked at residents and non-residents, if anything, non-residents tend to value the open space system and Water Dog Park open space even more than the residents. So that was just interesting. And so I think that you have a special resource that Belmont residents appreciate and their neighbors also appreciate as a special resource. Next slide. And as I said, not very many unsatisfactory things with the open space system, the few kind of things. And once again, residents and non-residents are very much aligned on the things that were bothering them. Next slide. So then we asked people, if you could enhance the parks, what would you do? And so what people said is the most important enhancements would make to the park were actually to maintain and improve the tree canopy, the number one thing, followed by then more multi-use paths, adding restrooms, adding more trees, adding benches and places to sit, and pump tracks, and then sort of dropping down to quiet nature, shade, picnic areas, and more community gardens. So these were sort of the top 10 things that got the most votes from Belmont residents. The things that we suggested that maybe people, they don't really want to see, or they don't think they would enhance the experience, were opportunities to purchase food or drinks, access to Wi-Fi, very interesting. You know, those are clearly things that people had strong feelings about. You drop down, don't think you need lacrosse fields, outdoor exercise station, archery, rental facilities, et cetera, et cetera. You can look at this in more detail. Now, what you need to be aware of is that sometimes there'll be a group that wants something not everybody wants, but you still might, because it's a segment of the age population or something, that we still might provide an amenity that wasn't in the top 10. But in general, your top 10 categories that residents want are the things we're really focused on making sure your park system provides. Next slide. And once again, we looked at that with you know, Belmont residents and non-residents, and the only place that you had sort of an outlier is actually, even though Belmont residents put a bike pump track in their top 5, clearly non-residents ranked that as even higher desire to see a pump track built. So that was sort of, you know, just, these are just pieces of data that we're just aware as we move through the process. Next slide. Although the things that they didn't value, both between Belmont and non-Belmont residents, in terms of Wi-Fi, outdoor exercise station, opportunities to purchase food and drink, these were things in the parks we were talking about. The same thing for Belmont and non-Belmont residents, an alignment there. Next slide. So then we asked people about the open space system and what kinds of things they'd like to see in the open space system. And so the number one thing was repair and maintain existing trails. You know, then you drop down, as I say, you know, almost 1,200 people thought that was important. Then you drop down to people wanting to add additional trails, add more dogway station, add trail safety signage, permanent restrooms, and add sort of interpretive wayfinding signage for proven widen existing trails, drinking fountains, and so on. So that, but you can see the sort of general direction that Belmont residents would like to see the improvements to the open space made. Then when you looked at the things that they did not want to see happen, this is Belmont residents, they did not want to reduce or limit the number of trails, designate certain trails for certain uses, establish use policies, add exercise stations. So those are kind of the top 4 things that they did not feel would enhance the open space if we undertook those things. So these are just what the Belmont residents felt. So with the next slide, we sort of compared, Kelly, next slide, what the Belmont residents and the non-Belmont residents, you know, and the only big difference was non-residents would like to see more trails added, even more than Belmont residents would like to see added. But in all the other areas, they were very much in alignment. And even that's not unalignment, it's just a higher degree of enthusiasm for adding more trails. Next slide. And then the same thing with, you know, a general alignment between residents and non-residents, except that non-residents even more enthusiastically do not want to limit the number of trails, do not want to designate trails for certain uses or establish use policies. So those were just some of the things we found out as we went through. Next slide. So in the final set, so we asked about parks, in athletic facilities, we asked about open space, and then we wanted to ask about outdoor recreation programs, because you have a lot of extensive recreation programming done by your department. And so what were some of the things that people were most interested in? And the number one thing was volunteer opportunities. People wanted to have more volunteer opportunities, more nature-oriented activities, more programs for youth, more family events, more outdoor recreation exercise classes. So these are the kind of things that people really feel the recreation program should be offering them. things they were not as interested in were more large events. You know, that was sort of many more people, and maybe a little bit more, you can see on what more people wanted to add small events than sort of disagreed with the small events. So you get this kind of thing. So that was sort of interesting. But once again, very few things that people did not want to see, and a lot of things that people wanted to see that were really sort of altruistically oriented, family, volunteering opportunities, and nature. So I thought that was very telling of sort of the makeup of the Belmont community and where their priorities are. Next slide. And it seems, as I said, to align with what non-residents felt, although the Belmont community really even more strongly, other than volunteer opportunities, which non-residents are interested in as well, about this sort of, you know, youth and nature-oriented kind of activities. Next slide. And, you know, same alignment of more large events or small events as being things that they didn't really want to see. But once again, that is so small compared to the big green arrow. It doesn't feel like a significant kind of thing. So these are sort of an overview, as I said, of some of the overall patterns we're seeing. But a lot of them we're going to need to take a deeper dive and explore in much more depth. As I said, either pulling numbers from the survey or actually getting out and talking to members of the community and conducting some focus groups. So we had initially thought about 5 potential focus group topics. One, obviously about open space. You know, we really need to do a deeper dive with members of the community to talk about sort of some of the results of the survey. The relationship to the school district and youth sports, and that's a very important relationship right now, and we want to make sure we explore that during the master planning process. The idea of inclusivity, it had come up in a number of discussions, even with your group, about, you know, how can we make Belmont feel more inclusive, especially to people with special needs, or how can everybody feel welcome? So maybe that's a topic we need to explore in more depth. You know, tap into that youth market. Often after small children stop using the playground, we lose teens and they aren't participating in our recreation programs or playing in our parks as much. So how can we re-engage youth into our parks and open space system? And then obviously the senior population, we want to make sure they may not have participated as heavily in the survey. You know, the over 65, we want to make sure we touch base to find out how the park system can be serving them better. So these were some of potential focus groups. We you know, are seeking your input and thoughts on those groups. And if you think there's some other ones that we should maybe be exploring topics with further, we can talk about that. Next slide. So I think we're going to turn it over to the advisory committee to provide their questions and comments, and we'll try and answer as best we can.
And also at this time, if you guys don't mind, I'd love for the committee to do a quick introduction of themselves and allow us to understand your role on the committee. I apologize, I should have done that sooner. And since Zoom can make this kind of tricky, if you guys don't mind, I'm just gonna call on you, and forgive me, I will do your name as best as I can. So just to get us out of the way, Linda Gates, Casey Case, Kelly Latosky, and Grant Hudson are all Gates and Associates. Hi. So Bridget, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I think we all know each other, but just in case not, I'm Bridget Shearer, Parks and Rec Director for the City of Belmont.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Michael?
Can I just interject for 1 second? Any chance you can stop sharing so that we can see?
Yeah, I'd love that. Yay! Hi. I'm Linda.
Hi. Okay, Michael, would you mind introducing yourself?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Moran. I'm the Youth and Teen Supervisor for the city.
Thank you. Susan?
I am Susan Wright, and I'm a former Parks and Rec Commissioner, and I work for the Office of Sustainability for the County of San Mateo.
Welcome. Thank you. Ula. Am I saying that right?
Hi, yeah, I'm Ula Four, and I am a Parks and Rec Commissioner.
Thank you. Caroline?
Hi, everyone. I'm Caroline Purrs. I'm the chair of the City of Belmont Planning Commission, and I live in the Homeview neighborhood and have 2 young children.
Oh, great. Thank you. David?
About that. David Bronstein, resident and former city council member.
Welcome. Thank you. Eli.
Hi, everyone. Eli Latimer-Lowe, Homeview resident, been a resident of Belmont since 1992, and happy to be on the advisory committee.
Wonderful. Thank you. Daniel.
Daniel Ortiog, I'm the Parks Manager with the City of Belmont, so I'm a staff member on this committee.
Hi. Lynn.
I'm Lynn Bell. I've lived in Belmont since 2003, and I live in the Belmont Heights area where I have access to all kinds of trails and bike paths and hiking paths. Happy to be here.
Great. Thank you. Abby.
Hi, I'm Abby. I am a former Youth Parks and Rec Commissioner, and I'm also on the Youth Advisory Committee.
Great. Thank you. Austin.
I'm Austin Lee, and I'm a member of the Park and Rec Commission, and I've been in Belmont 9 years now, 2 elementary school age children.
Great. Thank you. Karen.
I'm Karen Hasvaletta. I'm the Executive Director of Footsteps Childcare and a 30-year Belmont resident in the Cipriani neighborhood.
Great. Welcome. Thank you. Scott.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Sizemore. I live in the Sterling Downs neighborhood, and I'm on the advisory committee.
Welcome. Thanks. Dean. Oh, you're muted. We were on a streak there. I was really impressed. It's okay, Dean. It happens to the best of us.
All right. Unmuted, right?
Yep, you got it.
All right. Dean Wilson, McDougal area resident, representing probably over 65 group. Been here since 82.
Awesome. Thank you. And Nelson?
Nelson Cordaway, Belmont Heights resident for 18 years and former youth sports coach. And professionally, I'm in law enforcement. I'm a police captain with a nearby agency. And I think that's one of the reasons I got invited to participate on the advisory committee, just any impacts on emergency services. And I was a youth sports coach, so maybe that too.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, Bob.
Hi, Bob Stahl. I live up in on Wakefield Drive in Belmont Heights, 35+ year resident of Belmont, enjoying the hikes on the Water Dog trails.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome to all of you. So if we are willing, now we can see each other's faces. Let's open it up for questions and comments on some of the information we provided this evening.
Casey?
Yes.
I think Sergio Redavero is in the meeting, but wasn't.
Okay.
And so I just don't want to pass him up.
Yes, thank you. Kelly, let me know if you see him and are able to elevate him to panelist. And then we'll give him a second to introduce himself as well.
He said he was in, but.
I don't see Sergio's name, but it might be under a different name.
I don't think so. I'm texting him because I wanted to remind him of the meeting.
Thank you.
He said he was here, but when he gets here.
Do we know who Zoom Agave is?
That's us. That's Gabe. That's our screen.
Sergio, if you can hear us, maybe if you could raise your hand if you're one of the attendees. We don't see you here under the name Sergio.
He's under accounts payable.
He's under accounts payable. There it is. Okay. All right. Let's promote accounts payable. And
always let's pro accounts payable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Sergio. Welcome. Uh-oh, I don't think we can hear you. But you're not muted. You're just giving us all sorts of trouble this evening. Somebody give it, David, tell us about Sergio. There he is. We can hear him.
All right. Hi, I'm Sergio Redavero. Thanks, David, for getting me on there. My family lives in by Cipriani Elementary School. We've been in residence in the city of Belmont for 23 years. I have 3 children, and I'm involved with youth sports in the community, and hopefully I can help.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm hopeful we have everybody, so I'm going to circle us back to questions and comments.
This is Bob Stahl. I have just a few items. One is maybe to start off talking about the advisory committee. I'm wondering if it'd be worthwhile for, I guess, information about who the members represent, what community. For example, a lot of people didn't know that I was on the advisory committee in my neighborhood. Frankly, I picked up 25 surveys from Bridget here a few weeks ago to make sure that I went out and passed them out. A lot of people said, oh, I didn't even know there was an advisory committee. I didn't know you were my representative, so on and so forth. And I'm wondering if there should be something that goes out to the community as to, again, who their member would be that would represent them. Again, we do have several people from the Belmont Heights Committee where I live. Lynn and Nelson are there, and possibly somebody else, but it'd be good information, I think, to get out to the community about who the representative is. So if somebody in Belmont Heights, which I'm not sure, there's maybe 600 people that live up here, it'd be good for them to know that either Lynn or Nelson or myself is somebody that they could reach out to. So that'd be one thing. And again, both for Bridget as well as everybody, Linda Gates and so on. It's good that you broke down, I think, the breakdown between the Belmont residents and the non-Belmont residents. That was one of the questions I had is again, I kind of added up the numbers and I came up with 49%. One comment there, I still kind of, and again, I'm not sure what everybody else feels, is that that the non-residents have such a say in this whole process. And again, I've lived here since 1985. Hike the trails plot, as well as the cross-country trail. I live real close to that as well. And my kids biked on the trail, so on, over the years. But it just seems like if there's 51% of the people that are responding to the survey, it just seems like they have too much a say as to what is going on here. So I wanted to throw that out to the committee. And then also, open space, which again, Linda, thanks for bringing it up. Open space is the dominant issue here. By far, that's what people are responding to. And I think there's just got to be a lot more effort and input about the open space. It's, I think, as we realize, it's somewhat of a controversial area too. I was actually appreciative of the environmental study that was, issued out by Bridget the other day. There were certainly things that I learned in there, and hopefully other people were able to read through it. But at the same time, I think there has to be a professional environmental study done by a non-biased group. And again, I think it's got to be well documented that, again, this would be done in a very professional way. So again, those are some of my comments.
So if I could just, thank you, Bob. I'll just step in there real quickly. The report that I distributed to you is not one that the city initiated. That was one that was shared with us from a resident group. And so just so everyone who's listening understands, that's not a report that the city commissioned, nor have we reviewed it or vetted it or anything like that. I just, I knew it was going to be mentioned this evening, and so I wanted to share that with the advisory committee. So as mentioned at a prior commission meeting, the city is planning to conduct, as Bob said, sort of an independent, third-party open space assessment as part of this larger process of looking at our open space. We recognize that that I think we'll all come up with better solutions and recommendations if we do that. So, thank you.
Bridget, can I just jump in for a second? I have other comments, but I just wanted to tag on to what you just said. So do you have any idea when that will be coming forward? I mean, I don't know. I'm not following the city council, so I assume that the city council has to approve that for the expenditures of funds. And so I don't know how long a study would take, but I'm hoping that'll coincide with before we make any recommendations and go too far down the pipeline with this, that we will get the results of that. Is that correct?
Right. And so it's something that I put forth in the budget that is going to be approved shortly. it was not part of our original budget, and it looks like we need to do a little, more robust work there than maybe we'd initially thought. So what we want to do in this process is make sure that we give these topics the time they need. So we'll get a report and then incorporate that into our recommendation.
I have a question that relates to the budget too, just in broad terms. My sense is that the open space isn't an area of the Parks and Rec budget that has ever gotten very much money other than just sort of maintaining things that might have been just problematic. Is that true? And because some of the things that in reading the comments from people who you had sent those out, comments that have come in between, and there seemed a lot of interesting ideas, but things that sounded like they could be very expensive to implement, doing different things with trails. And is that something that you've heard the city council express support for, really doing it right, so to speak? Or is that going to be partially, this process is going to inform, if it's said, hey, this whole process is showing that this needs to happen, then budget would be allocated. I guess I'm just kind of curious, any background that might inform that.
Sure. Well, historical documents, if you look back, there's always a comment that, we need to find funds to do the kind of things that we want to do in the open space. And we do rely heavily on volunteers there, and, the CAL FIRE crews that we've had out there to do the fuel reduction work. That's a very low cost or cost effective, way to get that work done. But right now there is not a dedicated funding source to replenish our open space fund on a regular basis. So that's a conversation that we'll need to have with council, and this plan and the findings of this plan will inform that going forward.
Thank you.
I can see Scott has his hand raised.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great. Well, in response to Bob's first point, I thought Linda did a pretty good job of showing us that there were a lot of non-resident input in the survey, but that input was pretty much reflected by what the people in Belmont wanted. So if you take out the non-residents, then it's kind of the same. It was very similar response from both parties. So I don't see how they're getting an outsized say in what we're doing here. Thanks.
I'd like to comment on that. There were numerous I saw this myself. My son saw this, who lives in Burlingame, of the biker community, who reached out to other bikers to fill out the survey from all around the Bay Area. So I think, there were, on the open space, there were, as I recall what Linda said, there were 1,200 non-residents who responded on the open space, 900 Belmont residents, but 1,200 non-residents. And there were just numerous, comments that requested bikers from all these communities and their websites to respond on it. So I think it overwhelmingly, made the survey incorrect and somewhat unusable, frankly.
So actually, when I was sharing things with you, like about the bar graphs that stand up and, that was information from residents only. So the only time I showed non-residents was when I showed you the circular graphs, how they would compare. When I would show you the bar graphs and what the residents of Belmont wanted the most, that was Belmont residents only.
No, I saw that, Linda. I saw that. I understand that. But again, it definitely showed that, again, the response was, to me, reflected too much from non-residents.
Can I just ask for clarification there? Bob, can you give us an example of where you're seeing that, where you're not seeing the distinction between residents and non-residents?
My main point, Bridget and Linda, is again, just the website action that I observed, my son observed, different people observed this of, again, the biker community responding, giving their input. I guess my whole point is, this is a Belmont treasure that we have. And I think we all appreciate it. There's no question about it. I know you do, and all the people on this committee, I'm sure they do too. I just think that, again, we shouldn't give so much focus to non-residents. There were some, and again, as Linda brought up, and again, what she did show certainly did show the two rings. I'm not sure if that's the way to put it, but the Belmont ring and the non-resident ring. And sometimes it showed that, again, the non-residents, had a higher request level on some of the things that I would see as, I can tell that they're what their focus is, which is not something that I agree with.
So I'll just respond to that. So Bob, we're recognizing that, but we are also recognizing that those are non-resident responses. So our goal here today was to show the distinction between resident and non-resident responses and show where there was alignment and where there was not. So while, yes, there was, heavy participation in the survey from non-residents, they are identified as such, and we will consider that as we move forward.
Okay. I hear you.
I see some hand raises in the panelists. Abby, and then we can do
Yeah.
Karen and Ula.
Yeah, sorry. I just think we need to be a little bit careful, like at the onset of this process of engaging in this kind of discourse, because, and I'm sorry if this is a little controversial, I don't necessarily believe that Belmont residents are more entitled to a say in this process than other park users. If we're going to tout the beauty of our parks and advertise the beauty of our parks, then we should be prepared to share our parks. And I actually think it's like a really beautiful thing that people from other communities care about our space enough to give input and to request things that they would like to see. So, inclusivity was a priority, it appears, in the survey results. And I think that means being inclusive of non-residents too.
Thank you. Caroline, next.
Yes, and I understand the concerns that Bob is raising, and I understand as a Belmont resident, you're paying taxes, you want to make sure that the interest of the residents is prioritized. However, the focus groups might be an opportunity to focus on the Belmont residents and prioritizing their needs, and perhaps there can be an emphasis on having residents be on those focus groups and participate, and that would be one method to counteract any concern about the survey. And then my other response really to the issue about the assessment, the environmental assessment, I'm happy to hear that there will be some sort of responsive report that the city will order to counter the other one and provide an objective analysis. And I think as there were some issues raised about being objective, certainly as a commissioner for the Planning Commission, as an administrative judge, our role is to assess the evidence and the comments that come in and then give it the weight that they deserve. So I don't see any issue with the assessment coming in. I'm assuming it's considered a form of public comment, and I think we can review it and then make our own determination as individuals about how we want to weigh it.
Okay, Ula.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I just thank you everybody for your comments so far, and I just wanted to use some of them as a jumping off point. And I don't want to, duplicate efforts too much, but with regard to the residents versus non-residents, I think it is great to see the information broken out. I think it is important, but I also want to echo Abby's comment a bit, that it is valuable to hear what our neighbors are interested in. And as someone who uses parks and facilities and beaches in other areas, I know that I have an opinion about those, and I would happily share my opinion with those towns and neighboring neighborhoods. And I would hope that they would value that opinion. And I'd like for us to, in the spirit of inclusivity, make sure that we're considering both. It's really important that we're looking at both, just our residents, but looking at, what our neighbors have to say about our parks and recreation and open space. One other comment with regard to, I think, Bob, you mentioned that open space is clearly the dominant issue. And I don't know exactly what you meant by that or how you were referring to it, whether you thought that people were responding in the survey mostly to open space. But for me, it's actually incredibly important that the recreation programs and our parks get equal weight in this process. And I don't want us to get derailed with only focusing on open space. We have a lot of incredibly important things to think about when it comes to our parks and our recreation programs as well. So everybody knows that open space deserves attention. And I think, to Susan's point, perhaps more finances also directed toward open space. But I really want to stress the fact that we need to really be delving into all of the issues here. This is our opportunity to really make a difference for Belmont for the next 25 years. So let's not put all of our focus on open space.
Thank you. Next up, Austin.
Great. Just had to unmute myself real quick. Just wanted to, sort of echo some of the previous points, but also to remind all of us that in previous presentations with the Park and Rec Commission, and I'm sure at the City Council level and with Gates and Associates before, that this survey is just one piece of all of the data that we're going to collect. And then we're going to make assumptions, not assumptions, but make decisions and recommendations based on all of that information. Not one piece, that is more significant than the other. And then also just to hopefully remind us all that we start from a place of positive intent, right? Just because that we're talking about including residents or non-residents information doesn't mean that we are planning on using that one way or the other, or more significantly, it's going to influence the process. So let's start by thinking about what our goals are here, and that we're all coming from a place of positive intent when we're working through all these issues.
Thank you. Lynn, you have your hand raised?
Thank you. I feel at this point I'm beating a dead horse, so hopefully not. I loved what Abby said. Thank you very much. And as far as that line of residents, what came to mind initially was there are probably some people that live in the Highlands or just across the 92, as I'd see it, that are even closer to the open space than official Belmont residents that might be more down by Harbor or 101. So it's very hard to differentiate and say, one group is better than the other outside of paying taxes. Also, I was concerned that other issues concerning like the tot lots. I moved here when my kids were very young, and coming from Redwood City, and there is these incredible parks. Belmont didn't have much. And even though that is no longer an issue with us whatsoever, I just want to make sure that everybody does get heard and seen, and that we do have the athletic facilities and the recreation programs and the parks, and that we just make sure that those get as much attention as more open space issues. So that's it. And I'm happy to be part of this. So thank you again.
Thank you. Scott?
Hi again, everybody. Wow, I was very happy to see the large number of responses to the survey. At our last advisory committee meeting, before the survey went out, I asked Gates and Associates what they thought a good response to the survey would be. I think Linda, it was Linda that responded, and I think she said 700. So we absolutely blew that number away with 4 times that many responses, close to 3,000. So a big thanks to the city and the Parks and Rec Department for doing such a great job promoting the PROS survey. In light of that, I have a couple of suggestions for improving the open space. Going to open space. at Water Dog Lake Park and Hidden Canyon open space. The first suggestion is, when you drive up to Carlmont Drive and you're parking at the Hidden Canyon parking lot, then you go through a fence. But before you get to any trails, there's a big open space, maybe the size of a long, skinny football field. It's flat, it's muddy in the winter, it's sunbaked and rocky in the summer, and it's totally underutilized. People pass through that space on the way to the trails, but besides one bench, there's really nothing to stop for. My thinking is, what if we planted some native oak trees in that space that in future decades could become shade bearing and a place for families or church groups or hikers to lay down a blanket and have a picnic before or after using the trails. Another thought is, how about some really big rocks in there? They can be used benches or even bigger rocks, like 6 feet tall, 20 feet long, for children to scramble around on. The area around the rocks could be landscaped with native species and give families a place for a fun outing, for fresh air and moving bodies. I don't think a traditional metal and plastic playground set would be appropriate in that space. Any improvements, I think, would need to match the absolute stunning beauty of the surrounding canyon walls that have a natural feel. Then I had a second suggestion. In reading the survey results, I did notice an overwhelmingly positive response for more trails in Belmont. Nearly 2,000 people support more trails. That's an astounding 70% of responses, 70%. So why not plant some new trails in Water Dog Lake Park and Hidden Canyon open space? I've got suggestions for 2 mixed-use trails. One would start halfway up the elevator trail above the Hidden Canyon trailhead and snake along the hillside northwest, crossing Belmont Creek below the lake and connecting with the Lake Road Trail about halfway between the lake and the lower Lake Road trailhead on Lyle Way. This trail would connect the 2 ends of Hidden Canyon open space and Water Dog Lake Park without making you climb out of the canyons to the rim and then back down as presently is required if you're going to go from one end of the park to the other. The second trail would start at the top of Raccoon Run and head, oh, that's my dog, sorry, and head southeast between the Upper Creek Trail and Hastings Drive. This trail would give new life to Raccoon Run Trail, which is seldom used. And like the first trail I suggested, it would add new variations and loops to the way hikers, bikers, runners, and dog walkers use the trail network now. Unlike some of the improvements being considered by the city, like the new community center at Barrett, that's incredible in scope, it might include a swimming pool, gym, dog area, playing fields, which is all very expensive. And as such, it's unclear when these projects will get off the ground. These trails that I'm suggesting could be installed and maintained by volunteers at very little cost to the city and could be in place in under a year. Another benefit to the couple added trails would be less congestion on the trail network as users are more spread out. Those are my takeaways from the survey, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to express them, and I'm eager to hear what takeaways other people have. Thanks.
Okay, next up, Michael.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask, the slides that we saw this earlier, are they going to be put on the website? Because I like how you summarize the data versus SurveyMonkey. It'd be great to review it again after this meeting.
We thought we would post this whole meeting on the website so people could have an opportunity to see the presentation and hear comments too.
Okay, Eli?
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry if I missed this in the presentation on the survey data, but I'm curious to whether there's any, if we have any clarification on the usage rates of the open space versus the other facilities for both Belmont residents and non-residents. Do we know whether there's a disproportionate number of residents that use the open spaces versus the other park resources?
we did collect data about how often people use it and stuff. We didn't present that here, but we can extract that data out for you and provide that, just sort of usage patterns and how often people use it. We did collect that data. We just haven't meshed it yet.
That'd be great to see. Thank you.
Okay.
Daniel, if you want to go next.
Thank you. I wanted to just ask a clarification question on the one slide where you showed all the focus groups. And the one that stood out the most was the volunteering group. And actually that got a really heavily response to the survey question about volunteering opportunities. And I was just wondering if we kind of knew where those volunteers were intending to volunteer. Obviously, we've seen a huge uptick in civic engagement as shown with this committee here. So thank you all for your participation. But I mean, we've always had a lot of volunteers from youth sports representatives, from Eagle Scouts, from Girl Scouts, from school activities, as well as invasive species removal, or partnerships with NDNU for and things like that. So I was wondering, because that was a large response. Were we able to, through this survey, kind of identify who that focus group should now focus on?
So we didn't ask specifically the types of volunteer facilities volunteer activities people were interested in. We had a lot of write-in comments. We can explore if there's anything from the survey on that. And that could be something that we could dive into deeper, like the types of volunteer activities that Belmont residents are interested in, although there were a lot of non-Belmont residents who were also interested in volunteer activities. So we may be tapping even a bigger pool, but we can look and see if in the comments there's any leading things that, I don't want to make assumptions, just see what the data shows us. And then if we don't get enough, we can obviously seek more input on that.
Great. Next, Mr. Bronstein.
Thank you, Kelly. I think one of the reasons why some people are focusing on the open space a lot for this meeting is because while I didn't get through every single response, there were 96 pages from non-residents. And when I skimmed it, most dealt with biking and open space. So I think it's fair to say that it's certainly a big issue for Belmont. What I did today was contact the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District. They got me in touch with the Chief Ranger, Matt, who I understand Bridget also spoke with because he mentioned you, Bridget. And, I would love to hear him talk, or I don't know if this process will get into that and maybe it's in the weeds. I don't know, but I don't think so. And so there were a lot of different issues. He talked about perception versus reality. He talked about education. Because I asked him questions about how do they deal with certain issues. And I don't need to necessarily get into all of them because our task today, as I understand it, is to respond to the survey and then talk about focus groups. But I thought that it was important because he was talking about how you really need to plan for restoration and environment and the trails and multi-use. And it's not about coming up with great ideas for how do we do certain things, but to really plan for it. And I think that's what we're really talking about. And so I really appreciated that he was talking about both their successes and their challenges. And we're going to face that. But I think that the bottom line that we should take from this is that if this process is as it should be, clarifies issues, where if we're talking about restoration and making sure the environment is sound, are there certain places that no one's allowed to go to or only walkers? And I asked about parking, and I asked about, I'm trying to think, maintenance and enforcement. And there are clearly issues that we'll need to tackle as we recommend to the city council, or those are open-ended questions that the city council has to deal with. But without clearly articulating that in a plan and clearly articulating that with the community, we will continue to have problems. And so I think that we need to be very clear, and I'm more than happy to pass along this information to Bridget, and she can do what she wants with it. But at some point, I'd be really interested to find out where those types of issues crop up, because they're incredibly important for all sides. If we're going to coexist and we're going to work well together and we're going to live well together, these issues need to be thought out in the planning stages so they don't have problems when we actually live them out. So that was, I think, my major points. I think I will just mention that since I was on council before, I reached out to some of the council members that are on some of the other councils, and the information is interesting. I think that what we need to do, Bridget, if you can, am I creating that feedback, or is everyone hearing the feedback? Yeah, it must not, is it me? I don't know. I would like to know, one of the questions I want to know is perception versus reality versus urban myth. The bikers have said this in most of the comments, and that is Belmont is the only place on the Mid-Peninsula that we can go to. Bridget, I would like that clarified. I want to know where they can go. And are they just focused on here, or do they not know? Do we not know? Because I'm a bit confused on that point. And that dovetails nicely with the EIR and all the other things that we're referring to. So thank you very much.
Linda, I think the feedback may be on yours. So if you don't mind muting when you're not talking, it may not be, but I have a suspicion. Okay. All right. Susan.
Yeah, thank you. David, I appreciated what you just said, and I would like to build on it. I feel like I agree with whoever said earlier that we don't want to overemphasize the open space because there are so many other things. At the same time, I think that piece of it could use a little bit of a pulled out and be worked on in a side, or at least focused as a sub thing. And I think it may need, I can't remember exactly how all the steps play out post focus groups, but it almost feels like it needs a mediation session, if you know what I'm saying, because the comments that I was reading, people have diametrically opposed thoughts about what would happen there. And for some people to be happy there are no bikers, and then others like it's all a recreation playground. And so I feel like, as you just said, David, to coexist, we need to figure out how to use this resource in a way that honors everyone's use. And how can we do this well? And it can't just be, we were here first, go away, you know, whatever. We've heard all these viewpoints. But so a focus group is just hearing more of, what do you think? I think we're going to get more of what we just heard. But I'm curious if a combination of the expert view that you just said, David, would be helpful to know. But also then hear people representing all these sides kind of coming together and starting to say, what could we cook up that everyone can live with? And then come back to this group, because I don't know how we here can, I don't know if that's our job or what the end result is, but I feel like it needs to be, there was a real working session where, you know, to think through some of this. And I noticed there was a negative on the results, not wanting to have use policies or something. And that was especially negative on the non-Belmont residents. But I think there's something in all of this that we need to come to a agreement, and I think it would be helpful to have that be a little sidecar effort potentially.
Great. Eli, you want to go next, then Ula?
Sure, and thank you. I just wanted to call out, I'm looking through the survey data, and what I'm seeing is that 93% of respondents, 92.5% of respondents access our facilities for the purposes of individual exercise, which reminds me that we have a lot more in common than we might necessarily be appreciating through this sort of false dichotomy that's being drawn between cyclists and other users. So I would kind of caution us to maybe check our inherent biases a bit for or against those usages, and recognize that we're all out there trying to survive at a really, really difficult time.
Thank you, Ula.
Thanks for that, Eli. I really appreciate that sentiment. And I think what I heard Susan saying was, let's see if we've heard, I think many, many times, the views from many different sides. And maybe if we can jump right to sort of the solution-oriented process rather than, somebody said beating a dead horse, continuing this. So if there is, I don't know if a mediation is the right word for it, but I agree with that concept of can we get many different parties in a room and start to work through what might be some solutions, and are there ways that we can begin to move forward on this? But again, I do want to reiterate, I want to make sure that we are really giving our programs and our parks the attention that they deserve throughout this process.
Thank you. Lynn?
David, thank you for reaching out to Mid-Penn. I've been on those trails for almost 30 years, and they have a lot of experience with all kinds of users and keeping really well-maintained trails. So that leads into further support of, I don't know if you'd call it a focus group or what. I don't think we need to know either side anymore. I think it is time for the city to come up with a plan, because it is an open space. It is a beautiful environmental area. We're all there because we like to be outside, and we have far, far more in common. But there really needs to be an oversight, and what does the city want to see used with this space? But I think the idea of having people under an umbrella, because we have far more similarities than differences, will help the city come to a decision on how to support the open spaces. So thank you for everybody that's come to that conclusion.
Thank you. Scott?
I think I'm echoing what Lynn just said, but yeah, we have heard all the views, and but the data shows overwhelmingly multi-use is what the people want. So I think it's time to move past the bike ban idea and just accept that it's a multi-use facility.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Dean? Unmute. We can't hear you.
Sorry. So, yeah, when I looked at the survey responses, what I take away was, first of all, the response was really impressive, and that is awesome. The open space seems to me everybody wants it, or a significant number of people responses want it to remain natural, want to protect the areas surrounding water bodies, but at the same time have it be an outdoor recreation area. Understanding that the city should be able to close certain areas when there's restoration or maintenance needed, or particularly steep trail areas where bikes, I mean, there are areas up there where, it's you can't hardly even walk on it, let alone bike it. So they need to be, maintained and shut down. But yeah, I think the response do come back wanting the multi-use running, hiking, biking areas up there. Unrelated to open space, I saw some areas where people were talking about, our sports fields, grass areas needing some maintenance for, baseball, softball, soccer. Some of those could use some work for sure. There was a fair amount of, hey, a lighted tennis, pickleball area would be something we could look at. Those are just some of the things I saw.
Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a few things. Again, even though I kind of dwelled on the open space, I'm not even contending that's the only area that we need to look at. Certainly I participated in a lot of activities, and my family has, in a variety of the activities throughout Belmont. So again, I just feel that the big response came to the open space, and I think that's so important. Obviously, it's shown up today in our discussion. A few things about, again, the comments about the multi-use. I'm for multi-use, but in a way that it protects the wildlife, way that it protects the environment. Again, as the individual who was on just before me talked about, some of the trails are so beaten up that it's hard to hike, and even I'm out there on the trails 5 to 7 days a week, and it's hard to even walk up some of the hills that are so beaten down. And I think that, again, the environment is so important. This is just a beautiful, beautiful area. And again, one of the survey questions talked about, the safety and so on. And I just looked it up here, about the open space. 78% of the people said that walking doesn't feel safe on the trails. 70% said biking doesn't feel safe on the trails, which was rather interesting. But again, regarding the multi-use, I almost think there need to be separation, biking trails from hiking trails. That's a strong feeling that I have. I've been nearly hit, and my wife several times, by bikers coming around turns very fast. My daughter-in-law won't allow us to bring our grandkids on the trails anymore because there's a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they're one's 40 inches tall, the other's 44 inches tall, I think. And again, they want to run on the trails. Well, again, if they do that, again, they can get hit. We literally have to hold their hands because of the safety issue with the bikers coming around turns and around the hills and so on. So I think, again, I like the idea of multi-use. There's no question about it. But some of the trails too are 24 to 30 inches wide. If a biker's coming by, somebody has to get off the trail, step to the side, step in the poison oak or whatever it is. And again, that's just it's a consideration. I think people need to observe that's a fact of life there.
Thank you, guys. So we did a lot for some public comment time. So unless there's any other comments we want to take from our committee, final comments or questions, I see one from Caroline. Then after that, I think we should open it up for public comment, and we'll do our best to maintain the time of each commenter on that so that we're all honoring our commitment to our 8:30 stop time, or at least as close to it as possible. So Caroline.
I'll make this quick. I think one of the original questions from Bridget and Linda was whether we agree with the way the focus groups are divided. And I do agree with them. I think that they cover all of the issues that were raised in the survey. So step one, I agree with them, but I did have some questions about how are they going to be, who are the members of the focus group? Will there be a dedicated member of the committee who will be assigned to a focus group? What's the timeline? Do you expect some sort of objective or some goals that come out of each focus group? Some sort of mutual understanding, especially with the open space on goals that everyone has for that particular area. So I'm just wondering how logistically that's going to work and how is that going to fit into our timeline?
So I'll talk a little bit, and Bridget, you might fill in with. So I think in terms of the focus group, it would be nice if someone from the advisory committee was there because they could share back what they heard from that. I think ideally, with focus groups, I like to build consensus, like start with what our criteria is, and then we test ideas against that criteria. And we come out with some either recommendation or plan or something. In different ways, it's different things, but different ways that we could implement some of the criteria out of that. And starting with a foundation, as you say, it is a little bit almost facilitation, but we have to come together on a recommendation that we take to the city council. And as long as the both groups can't find alignment, there's nothing to go forward with. So that would be, you know, and the same thing like meetings with school district and youth sports is trying to find common ground. So everybody articulates what they desire to come out and our key criteria, and then with ideas get tested against that criteria. So I think I answered that question. Is there something else, Bridget, you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that'd be great. I'm going to ask the committee members to send an email indicating which focus group or groups you would be interested in participating in. And then we can ask the community to send an email to info@belmontprosplan.com to indicate interest in participating in the focus groups. And then I do suspect that we'll have to do some additional outreach to some of the groups. Maybe Abby can help us get some of the youth folks present. And if anybody else has ways to kind of direct us to some of these groups a little more effectively, that would be great. Because I know we have we've had sort of a common set of voices here in our attendee list and in our advisory committee, but we would like to reach beyond that a little bit with our focus group. So we'll put some things out on social media and through the city manager's message as well to try to solicit some input for that.
Bridget, how will the focus groups be chosen? Or Linda, how are the focus groups chosen? Is that the public we're talking about?
I think we would probably, I don't think they're literally chosen. I think that people who want to participate need to have an opportunity to participate. So this could be even like a bigger workshop on something, if that's what it takes. I want to feel like that, you know, with each group, each topic may take a different form. You know what I mean? Like the school district youth might be representatives of the youth groups meeting in the school district, you know, inclusivity. Something like the open space might need to be a bigger meetings facility where we can sort of, I mean, I'm hoping that some of these might be able to be done non-virtually, which would be wonderful to sort of have drawings up and move things around. We're just, you know, to the best we can, but I don't think we want to limit the people that can participate, because we want to feel like we're building a consensus. But if people come just to advocate a viewpoint, then we'll facilitate that out. Do you know what I mean? We have, the goal would be to find a common ground that we can move forward with. So I guess that's the criteria, that you're willing to roll up your sleeves and find a common ground.
So I think what's going to be helpful for this is some of it's going to have to just be based on availability, right? If we're getting input from the general public, we can't then send out a doodle poll to the entire city and see when people are going to be available. We're going to have to identify some times where we're going to have these things, and that's going to somewhat determine who can participate.
Okay, Lynn, you had raised your hand.
Thanks, and I don't want to take too much time. I think I just felt bad ending on a note on open space about Bob not wanting to take his 6 and 8-year-old grandkids out on the trails. You know, I had mine toddling around since they were 1 and 3, and now they're 19 and 21, so they're fending for themselves. There are thousands of trails across the US, across the world, that are multi-use, and they are shared and people can be safe. We have those in the local area up at Mid-Penn. So, you know, we all just have to work together, and I just know that we can, but we can make things very safe, and I plan to help with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brunstein and Austin just raised their hands as well.
Thanks. So one of the questions is, are these the appropriate focus groups? I don't think there's a problem with them. My only question is, are we missing anybody? Is there a group that we're not capturing? Because I'm looking at open space, that's universal. That could be any age. We're talking about bikers and walkers and dog walkers and so forth. School youth sports makes sense. Inclusivity, youth and seniors. Is there a middle group or any group that we're missing before we sign off on it? I asked that of the whole group.
I'll throw one out and see how the group feels about it. About dog owners, not in open space, but in all of our parks. Dog ownership is through the roof, and we could have a perfect focus group at our morning hours at Barrett and get input from dog owners right there. So that would be one that I might propose could be helpful.
Okay, Austin.
I don't want to interrupt any ongoing conversation if people had comments about the focus group. I just had an agenda clarifying question before we jump into the community comments. So whenever we're ready to do that.
So if someone had a focus group comment, just I see three hands raised.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I put my hand down. I think I keep thinking of those with the youngest kids who have the absolute least amount of time. So those infant, toddler, preschoolers. And if there's a way to draw those in, I will go knock on doors if we need to. But they're really valuable, and they're going to have the most longevity, thinking that they could be raising their family. So they probably have the longest stake in this. So if we can make sure that youth also involves way before school time.
I can reach out to my parents and families to get them involved, the preschool parents.
I'll just challenge that real quickly though. Have those groups seem to have been represented in our survey? And I don't know if there was any controversy there that we would need to look at. I'm just challenging here.
Like, I think I'm not thinking like, if focus doesn't have to be a challenge, doesn't it? Isn't it just a focus could be, let's make sure they might have specific input on a given area. I guess I was thinking, gosh, focus in a positive way, not a challenging way. So that's it.
Okay.
Okay, we have Austin and Ula with their hands raised.
Ula, do you want to go first before I ask my agenda clarifying question?
Sure. Yeah. I really, it's a little bit of a reiteration. My question, it was more of a clarifying question about youth. I feel like youth is a super broad category, and I think that's what you were getting at, Lynn. I think that the needs of, say, middle schoolers and high schoolers are incredibly different from the youngest set. And so when I think about focus group, it's not to say that we didn't capture them in the survey. I think we did, and I think we had pretty good representation when it comes to the youth. But for me, the focus group is more about sort of the brainstorming, bouncing ideas off of one another, and maybe getting at things you couldn't get from a survey. I appreciate that we had some open-ended questions and some opportunities for people to comment, but maybe it's an opportunity to get at something that we weren't really able to get at in the survey. And then with regard to dog owners, I do think that a focus group of dog owners is a good idea, not to just keep expanding the number of focus groups that we need to do.
Okay, Austin, we might be ready for your clarifying question.
Thank you. So just in the agenda, when we talk about the public comments, and is it fair to say that they're directed to be addressed towards these specific topics, the survey results and potential focus groups, not necessarily expressing a specific solution or a proposal for a certain problem, or sort of readdressing issues that have already been shared with various groups. There's with the focus groups and future engagement with the panel, like that's the time for solutions and specific proposals and discussing certain items.
Yes, that's correct. I think we were trying to decide who was going to respond to that. But yes, we do want our public comment. We would really appreciate if it was focused on the items that we discussed this evening. So overview of the survey, discussion of focus groups. So we love and value your opinions on the elements of the master plan as well, but the format for this evening's discussion was really to give us commentary on the agenda items we addressed this evening. And if there are other comments that you desperately do still want to share, please feel free to send emails to info@belmontprosplans.com or visit the website belmontprosplan.com. Okay, so with that, I would love to open it up to the public comment. We're going to let Kelly facilitate. And as a reminder, if you are attending in our webinar, please use the raise hand platform to let Kelly know that you'd like to be elevated. And at that time, you will be asked to unmute and present your comment.
And I'm just going to go in the order they populate on my screen. I have Mike first, and then Rowan, and then Dennis. Mike, if you are still there, go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. My name is Mike Monroe. I'm a Belmont resident for 30 years. And I wanted to first compliment the Gates and Associates for a very comprehensive survey. You got to a lot of the issues that I think are important for our city. Unfortunately, we do have a small vocal minority taking all the oxygen out of the room, but hopefully we'll have an opportunity to deal with that in one of the breakout sessions on the open space. We do have a lot of other priorities that we need to take care of, and I hope that we can do that. I hope that we can move on from this single issue that is dominating everyone's attention and get on to other things. One other comment I have is Mr. Brownstein, I believe, stated that 77% of people feel unsafe walking in the open space. That's page 7 of the report. And actually, I can understand how he made that error. I made it the first time I read it. There's 177 people who commented that way. That is about approximately 6% of the 2,800 who responded. It's 77% of the people who said that they felt unsafe in any of the 3 columns that are to the left. So the data looks one way, but the underlying data are very different in that case. And I think we need to be careful about how we bring our preconceptions into reading of all this data. I thank you for a great presentation tonight.
Kelly, can I just quickly respond? That wasn't me. So
my apologies. Someone said 77%.
It's okay. I'll take all the arrows, but not on that one.
My apologies. Whoever said it, I should not have named you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Rowan?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Paul. That's my son's name on the computer. I'm a Belmont resident as well. And I just wanted to comment a little bit on this idea that only Belmont resident responses should be counted. I think that's really contrary to our community's values. And I also want to point out, I want to read a direct quote from Mayor Charles Stone's State of the City address. He's had this to say about the survey. He said, quote, "I would encourage everyone in Belmont, or even if you don't live in Belmont, if you use our facilities, to pay attention to that website. There's going to be a survey that goes up at some point and give us feedback." So our elected officials have encouraged, our community at large to participate in the survey. And also I want to reiterate that the PROS guiding principles include, number one, to promote equitable access to resources across the entire city, to promote inclusion to people of all backgrounds, and to make all users feel welcome and safe. And so our parks and open space have stakeholders that go beyond our city limits, and that includes many volunteers who maintain the trails. Many of those volunteers come from the Highlands, from San Carlos, Redwood City, our neighbors from neighboring towns. So I think their voices should count too. And I think Belmont, as a community, we shouldn't follow the model of Palo Alto. As you may have seen in the news recently, they had limited access to Foothills Park for decades. And the NAACP and the ACLU found that had a disparate impact on communities of color and socioeconomically disadvantaged communities, for example, East Palo Alto. And it was only until those organizations threatened to sue did Palo Alto open up their Foothills Park to their neighboring communities. So, the plan's guiding principles have been written. Our elected officials have spoken on that topic. And I think that the voices of the stakeholders in our broad community shouldn't be silenced, they shouldn't be segregated, and they shouldn't be excluded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly, you're muted.
Oh, Dennis?
It's
You able to
Denise.
unmute? Denise, sorry.
It's okay. Everybody does it. Thank you so much for this meeting. As anyone who is familiar, I'm a Belmont resident. I grew up here and I still live here. As anyone who's familiar with surveys understands, surveys can be constructed and used to promote a biased objective. That said, there are two main issues facing this committee and the usage of this survey. Number one, is this survey valid? If so, the whole survey is valid, and you can't pick and choose which part of the survey you think is valid and have a reason for why another portion of the survey isn't valid. So if the survey is valid, it clearly shows that 2,153 respondents indicated they used the open space, and only 593 respondents indicated they used the sports complex. This doesn't warrant the millions of dollars that Belmont has spent on the sports complex. So, this survey shows that if you're going to take this survey seriously, it suggests that we don't care about our fields. We don't care about our sports complex. Now, the second issue is who participated in this survey. We know 51% were non-Belmont residents. That's fine. And that we know 49% are supposedly Belmont residents. But frankly, a biker in Atherton could easily tick the box that he lives in Belmont Heights and nobody would know. To see how much influence mountain bikers have had on this survey, simply, everybody on this committee, you should do this. Google mountain biking, water dog, and the word PROS, P-R-O-S. Mountain bikers throughout the greater Bay Area mobilized to overwhelm this Belmont survey. Silicon Valley mountain bikers, Mountain Biking Project, Reddit, All Trails, Google Groups, Facebook, and the list goes on. I'm not here to tell you what you're going to think about the survey. I can point them, as a former PR person, I could shoot 100 holes into the survey, the way the wording was used, etc. Also, the complete data needs to be put online, not what you pick and choose to put out. You need to put out the complete data, all the results from the neighborhoods in Belmont, everything. But the one thing we can all agree on is this survey shows there's great interest in the open space. The public interest warrants that this process include multiple standalone community engagement opportunities. I agree, just merely getting more opinions we'll just keep spinning the wheel. We need something like the mediation that folks talked about to start really coming to a common ground where we can continue recreational use, but do it in an environmentally sustainable way. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, Joanne.
Hi there, Joanne Adamkevich here. I'm a 14-year resident of Belmont in the Sterling Downs neighborhood. First, I want to thank everybody on the advisory committee for your service. I appreciate the time and thought that you're putting into this and the contentious maybe process you've stepped into. I actually don't want to talk about the open space. First, I wanted to request kind of similar to what Denise just said. I did notice that the comments, the free text comments, the PDF that was posted, many of the comments were cut off. I think like word wrap wasn't selected. And so they trail off. It'd be great if we could actually see and read all of the comments. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. And then secondly, I wanted to put in a plug for recreational facilities and programs that do speak to kind of our tweens and teens. I had exactly the experience that was described here. I've raised my 2 kids here. They were born here, and they're now 14 and 11. So they've basically aged out of using the wonderful Alexander Park that we have here in Sterling Downs, but there's really no place else for them to go in Belmont. My boys have taken up riding the scooter, sort of like a skateboard with a handle. And we have been all up and down the peninsula, in fact, all up and down the West Coast, and have found skate parks to be a great place where youth are able to congregate and do something healthy and outdoors and kind of have their own space. And I've seen, sure, young kids like 4, but really it's the tweens and teens. So a skate park would be great. I understand that speaks to just one kind of constituency here in Belmont. And so the other one I want to suggest to you, which I know is on your list that I do think speaks to all ages, is pickleball courts. That is a trend I have seen grow. I've played pickleball down in Palo Alto, and I'm consistently impressed by the usage of the Mitchell Park pickleball courts by all ages. Pickleball is more accessible than tennis, I think, for a beginner. And so you see kids playing, but you also see seniors playing. And I think we did speak to wanting to have recreational opportunities for our seniors. And so I really do think that converting some of our existing tennis courts here, double painting them so that pickleball can also be played would be a big plus. For all ages, both the kind of tweens and teens that I spoke about, all the way up to our seniors. So again, thank you for the survey. It was really interesting to see the process and the outcome. Thank you for the nice graphs today. I thought the presentation was well done. And thank you again for being on the committee.
Thank you. Okay, Ed, you are next.
Hello, thanks everyone. This is about open space and hopefully a little different take, and it does relate to the focus groups. As both a hiker and biker, I understand both groups' desires for water dog, which are difficult to resolve, but we need to focus on the best chance for coexistence. Take parks and baseball fields. It's pretty easy to determine how well they're utilized. Criteria like amenities, appearance, user numbers, minimal downtime, everyone can agree on these. With natural open space like Water Dog and Hidden Canyon, these measures are insufficient or sometimes misaligned with, well, with what exactly? We're missing a long-term plan process. In our long-term plan process, we're missing a separate vision for open space, a city vision of what we expect and data on whether we have it. The best chance for coexistence must start with a shared definition of open space, including kinds of uses allowed, when to encourage more, when and how they should be limited. What is meant by safe use of trails? How is it measured? How much health of the environment should be left to nature versus human intervention? At a minimum, to create a master plan, we need trail use historical data as baseline information for planning. I've spent a lot of time researching and preparing a summary of actual user activity data from reliable sources to help quantify what actually occurs in Water Dog, including some pretty revealing safety data. I respectfully request, if at your convenience, to present this summary to you, the Commission, and this committee in the next week or so. In closing, only a clear open space vision and real data you can all share will allow all users to have a framework for collaborating on solutions. The city can then test various plans in focus groups of residents. Let's use this plan process to do the best we can to leave Water Dog in good shape for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Kristen.
Thank you, committee members. It's clear to anyone that the survey has been hijacked by an outside interest group. with over half the respondents self-reporting as non-residents, but it's actually likely higher because as it was mentioned, an average Belmont survey gets about 700 residents, and this was totally an honor system that they were reporting. So I would argue that the percentage of non-residents was far higher. And you're right, we do care about the opinions of all non-residents, and we do want to serve their needs. But when it comes to setting the policies, the priorities and the management policies, Belmont taxpayers are paying for that park. And it should be only Belmont residents who set the priorities and policies. Another Belmont survey went out recently about our local city service priorities. It was literally titled Our Local City Service Priorities, and it only went to Belmont residents. But anyhow, all that aside, there are definitely two things we can agree that we all take away from this, that there's a huge influx of mountain bikers in our open spaces, and that 3 out of 4 respondents cited safety concerns as a detraction from their use in open space. So officials can no longer pretend that residents are exaggerating when we say you can no longer pretend that we are a small vocal minority. A large majority of residents cite this problem. We're not exaggerating. The conflict is real and it's sizable, and this survey validates that. And obviously we're all agreeing that open space is the single greatest topic of concern. I'm sorry, I do understand you have other topics, but this is clearly the tail that's wagging the dog. So we have a problem, and in order to address this problem, we need facts. We need objective analysis and an honest dialogue. I'm glad you're going to have a focus group on this. I think you might need more than one. And I'm glad you're going in that direction. So the previous speaker mentioned that he had data. I too have data. I collected last fall extensive data and presented it to a few of the commissioners about trail density and the management policies in open space districts throughout the entire San Mateo County area. It's very revealing. It's the kind of facts that we need to be basing a scientific-based policy on. So I respectfully request an opportunity to present that data to the PROS committee as well. And so it's disappointing that I think we've wasted our time and effort on a manipulated and biased survey. Water under the bridge. Now it's time, please, PRO committee, to start working on developing scientifically supported policies. No more finger pointing, no more anecdotal opinions. Let's get down to the actual brass tacks of working out policy and looking at science and facts and making sure our policies are sustainable for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Pat.
Hello, thank you. My name is Pat Curviello, and I'm a resident of Belmont. And I think the survey opinions of the non-Belmont residents should carry no weight with this committee or in the master plan process. The master plan for our parks and open space is a Belmont issue, not an issue that affects San Carlos, San Mateo, Redwood City, or any other neighboring cities. And as such, our master plan should be solely decided by the opinions of Belmont residents who pay their taxes here. To be on this committee, you have to be a Belmont resident because our master plan is a Belmont issue, and the committee members, we are told, were selected to represent the interests of different Belmont neighborhoods and demographics. Our Parks and Recs Commission, including the youth commissioners, also have to be Belmont residents because the management of Belmont Parks and Recreation is solely a Belmont issue. Our city council members have to be Belmont residents because they are elected to represent the interests of Belmont residents. It would be ludicrous for any of these people in these committees, commissions, or our city council to be non-Belmont residents. We recently received a survey mailed to us from the city of Belmont asking what we as Belmont residents think the priorities for Belmont should be. This mailer was not mailed to the residents of neighboring cities because the priorities of Belmont is an issue for the residents of Belmont to decide. And quite frankly, why should we care what non-residents think our city's priorities should be if they don't live here? This mailer highlights the fact that even though we welcome visitors from other cities, their opinions on Belmont management priorities, no matter how informative they may be, are clearly not solicited and should carry no weight against the opinion of Belmont residents. It is the same for the priorities of our master plan for our parks and open spaces. It is a Belmont issue that should be decided solely by Belmont residents. The opinions of non-Belmont residents should carry no weight nor tip the scales against the opinions of Belmont residents. Accordingly, the survey opinions of non-Belmont residents should be ignored entirely. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I might not say this correctly. Thaddeus.
Yes, hello, you said it right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so hi everybody, my name is Thaddeus Block. Thank you for your time tonight. I thought it was a great presentation by Gates and Associates. Thank you so much. And I wanted to kind of congratulate the city on a really great response there to the survey. I mean, there has been such a higher level of response than we were expecting, both from locals and non-locals, which just says there's a lot of interest in this. Now, we want a roadmap for our PROS master plan to reflect our values as a community. And so thanks to this informative survey, we now have a broad community feedback on our goals and values. This will help us develop a plan to benefit the greater good, not a specific neighborhood, nor any one special interest group. Even before the survey, it was resoundingly clear from results at the ballot box for Belmont City Council, and clear from the hundreds of letters pouring into the city, there's overwhelming support for continued multi-use trails and our recreational open space. The hikers and the bikers are actually getting along really well. This new survey data confirms the earlier findings, and even more people are asking for more trails. So my suggestion, and I think a lot of people agree with this as denoted by the survey, let's continue our successful 30+ year history of inclusive behavior. Note the word inclusive. By welcoming all user groups to our recreational open space, we can enjoy it, we can protect it, we can work together. Let's say no to exclusive and divisive behavior. And I would also just want to point out one thing that I thought was really notable. I heard a mention by one of the advisors on this committee who wants to throw out the survey because there was a strong non-resident response. This individual managed to ignore the fact that we were successful in getting a very fantastic local response. That local response was double what we had hoped for the entire survey. It's like they want to throw away the surveys that they're finding inconvenient. I find this an unacceptable suggestion for someone who's on an advisory panel. So in closing, I just wanted to thank the excellent work by the city and the excellent work by Gates and Associates. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Bill.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a 48-year Belmont resident. I've played softball for 30 years in the city, coached 20 years and ran the AYSO soccer and little leagues, so I understand the needs in all the sports areas. But I do want to say that I feel that this survey is extremely skewed. Again, we've already heard that 51% were non-Belmont residents. If you go to, and I'll just cite one here, which is the Water Dog Trailkeepers website, one of the founding members of that website states, and I quote, "Just a few more days, everyone fill out the surveys right now." There's 350 members, and I just printed out 3 pages, of which 26 people confirmed that they had sent the survey. And I guarantee you, these are not all Belmont residents. And I don't know how many of the 3,000 surveys were done in this manner. This is not a legitimate survey based on the facts and what I'm seeing. So I think my opinion is the survey should just be thrown out. One of the committee members suggested building a new trail. I think he has to understand that Belmont has the highest density per acre of trails of any place in the Bay Area, any existing trails systems. And I'd be glad to provide him all the information regarding that. It's readily available online. So to build a new trail, we have to close existing trails. especially the Soho or the Labor of Love Trail that the bikers built on a rogue basis, which nobody is acknowledging. So I think the survey is extremely skewed and needs to be redone. Thank you.
Kelly, you're muted.
Sorry, next up, Jonathan.
I wanted to commend the department, commission, and Gates for conducting our first community survey and taking the pulse of our community's wants and needs. Our community has spoken, and overwhelmingly 93% respondents valued our parks, fields, and open spaces specifically for exercise. This was equally true both for Belmont residents and non-residents. Our open space trails are wonderful resources. Indeed, the most requested amenity to enhance our open spaces was first to repair and maintain the existing trails, which an overwhelming 87% of respondents endorsed. The second most popular request by 71% of respondents was, interestingly enough, to add additional trails. You asked the public what it wants, and the public is very clear. It wants more trails for exercise. Now, although some in our community desire to eliminate trails or limit the types of exercise allowed on the trail or to create a nature preserve, these ideas were surveyed and were not popular at all. In fact, only 5% of respondents voted to, quote, reduce or limit the number of trails. Only 33% voted to prioritize habitat protection. And given that we've protected 23,000 acres of the SFPUC watershed land as a natural preserve without any human intervention, just 2 miles west of Belmont, it's clear that the public wants our 260 acres, just 1% of what has been protected, to remain open for recreational use. Humans need open space too. I hope the advisory board and commission can now commit to multi-use once and for all, and let's get to the meat of open space planning. How can we improve the existing trail system by adding trails, rerouting trails, or yes, closing problematic trails in order to maximize the enjoyment of the open space for everybody, all users? As many of you know, I've done probably more nature restoration work at Waterdog than pretty much anyone. And when I'm out there working, I always ask myself, and what we now all need to ask is, what should we be doing today to make the park even better 100 years from now? That's our task. Let's get to it.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jen.
Hi, thank you. I'm a resident of Belmont, and I wanted to tell you that the results, I believe, of the online survey overwhelmingly point to the conclusion that open space is a major concern, reflected not only by the survey responses, but also by all the comments. This is despite the fact that the survey is population skewed against seniors over 65, not in the habit of computer responses while staying home during COVID, and despite being biased with questions such as widen and improve existing trails, which should have been asked separately, as improve is considered always an agreeable word. Nevertheless, where parks and athletic facilities and open spaces were broken out, survey responses did clearly indicate, even if it was only based on those that responded, that 79% of those that responded to that question reported that walking does not feel safe. Over 70% reported biking doesn't feel safe either. And almost 84% agreed that there were safety concerns in open spaces. There is a problem with how the open space is currently being managed and deterring people from enjoying its beauty due to the safety concerns. In addition, over 58% cited open space poor conditions and maintenance as a concern. Going forward, open spaces needed to be treated differently from parks and needs its own separate studies, and I'm very happy to see that you set it up as its own focus group. Non-Belmont bikers heavily influenced the survey from as far away as San Jose, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, and their comments readily admit that they come to our open spaces specifically to mountain bike because no other local open space allows mountain bikes. Non-resident mountain bikers can share our facilities, but they need to respect the survey results regarding safety, conditions, environment, and maintenance. Despite an overwhelming 51% response by non-Belmont residents to this survey, I hope and expect that Belmont Pros advisory members and Park and Rec commissioners will make policy and management decisions that reflect your public service to Belmont resident taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Linnea.
Hi, my name is Linnea. Mute yourself, Dad. Okay, I'm 14 years old and attend Ralston Middle School. I've lived in Belmont my entire life. I like to both hike and bike on the Water Dog trails. My family and I hike with our dog and Water Dog every week, as well as ride bikes there together. Recently, I decided to go for a solo bike ride in Water Dog. It feels much safer to ride on the trails than on the roads, and I got to see rabbits and other wildlife. It's a good break from the computer and the chaos of having brothers. And I think it's ridiculous to close the trails to bikes when it's one of the few places, when Water Dog is one of the few places we can be without cars. Most of my friends also bike in Water Dog and don't want it closed either. I was glad that kids were included in taking the recent survey, and I hope that the opinions of young people will continue to be important, possibly like a youth group or something. Also, I think that a pump track would be a good opportunity for people to build skills safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Moody. I'm a resident of Belmont Heights, and I'm a frequent user of our open spaces and an occasional user of several of the other Belmont parks. I reviewed the survey data, and as a mountain biker, hiker, and a nature enthusiast, I was really pleased to see the overwhelming support to keep our open spaces a place for recreation, as well as there being a strong desire to create new trails and improve the existing ones. While we only saw part of the data today, there really doesn't seem to be a big difference between resident and non-resident, which is reassuring in the data. I am deeply saddened, however, by the accusations that are being made tonight. Belmont Parks and Rec heavily promoted the survey. They extended the date so that we could get more data. And our mayor himself requested that people who use our parks and recreation spaces fill out the survey. That's why we have a significant number of people in our local communities in San Carlos and Redwood City and San Mateo filling out this data. We requested it. Our mayor requested it, that these are the people who use our parks and spaces. So I am really, really disappointed in the accusations that are being made with absolutely zero data to back it up. In addition, I would really appreciate if Gates and Associates clarified the piece of data that these percentages that are being thrown around, because I'm finding it difficult to really understand what the question was when it comes to people feeling unsafe riding and walking. And the numbers are small, the people numbers are small, 170 something and 190 out of the 1,500 people who answered that question. So, but I'd really like to know what that question was really looking for at some time. So if we could do that on the website, that would be great. And then on another topic, as to focus groups, I would like to suggest one be established to propose options to develop the Hidden Canyon Park. I'd love to see this park better utilized. My personal bias would be for a community garden, which could be a community food source or a display of native and non-invasive species. However, I'd also be open to some of the other ideas for this underutilized space, such as those made by Mr. Sizemore. And then finally, I really, really want to thank the Parks and Rec Commission and Gates and Associates for the comprehensive survey and data transparency that you've done, and to truly thank all the advisors who are selflessly giving your time and energy to this important endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last hand raise, unless any other attendees want to raise their hand now for comment.
Being as we had scheduled this meeting to extend until 8:30, I'm going to go ahead and close our public comment. And we only had just one final closing piece, and it may not be 100% necessary to reshare the screen, but we're just talking about where we're going next with things. So there is a reminder that we are in the process of our recommendations and prioritizations, which is straddled by the community outreach. So we will be continuing to discuss these topics, hone in on our focus groups, and later in the summer is when we begin thinking about our implementation plan. So based on all the information and all the feedback we have, what is our recommendation for the path forward? Our next steps are we will be, as you all know, focusing on our focus groups in May and June, and we will be coming back to the Council of Cities presentation on May 28th at 6 p.m. And we will be returning to the Parks and Rec Commission on June 2nd and the July and August Joint Commission meeting on July 21st. All of these will be posted on our website, being as I'm reading through them quickly. So with that, I would like to adjourn. I really appreciate all of your attendance and your time and your willingness to participate for a little bit longer this evening. And I realize that we're getting late into the night. So unless there are any final words from the Gates team or Bridget, I'm going to go ahead and hit the gavel, call that one.
I'll just again say really quickly, thank you all to the advisory committee for your time in preparing for this meeting. I know we put a lot of information in front of you in the days and hours leading up to this. We are putting more information on the website. We have actually reposted some of the data where the word wrapping wasn't right on the open-ended survey comments, and we'll be putting more information on the website. So anybody that's listening, just please keep an eye on belmontprosplan.com for further updates. And if you have information that you would like the advisory committee to see or read, please email to info@belmontprosplan.com. We will make sure that the committee members get it. And I want to thank the community for all of their very thoughtful comments and input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
All right, good night, everybody. Alicia, send me an email if you, I see your hand raised right now. Send an email and I'll respond to you. Thank you.